Alright, so you might be here because you've been thinking about purchasing a Razor and probably modding it and doing some aftermarket things to it. It's been brought to my attention that maybe I should do a video going through things that I look for when I'm purchasing a Razor. Now there's a few different models and kinds of Razors, so maybe we should touch base on that first. I would say your most common is going to be the MX style and the SX style. Now there's a few different colors of these, but they're basically the same. The MX500 and the MX650 are actually the same identical frame. The only difference is the motor that comes stock, which we're probably planning on getting rid of. So you'll see the Indian and the RSF, maybe even a chopper. But for the most part, the MX and the SX are going to be what you're seeing modded. And specifically, we're looking at the 36 volt models for all of these. When we're looking at the 500s or the 650 models, that is going to be the easiest swap in, bolt up kits that you can find, leaving you the space that you need. So specifically pulling the MX and the SX out, we're going to see a few different things on these. These kind of has been mixed matched and modded. Typically on the SX you're going to see 10-inch rims front and rear. And on the MX, you're going to see a 10-inch rear with a 12-inch front. Now, keep in mind, I actually swapped these rims around to give me a Supermoto look on this one. But generally, this 12-inch will come on the MX, and the 10-inch will be on here. So, keep note of that. Another thing to note is if you're wanting to put on 50 plastics, that the MX models have a better option to bolt those plastics on because it represents more of a 50 style frame with the 50 style seat going on. It still takes a small modification to get these to fit up, but you are going to see a little bit easier and better final results with the MX if you're trying to get this kind of look. Looking at the SX, we can tell a different seat style and a different plastic mounting option, where it's just a little bit different and different ways to hook this on. Looking at the MX, you guys might know this is where I keep a lot of my low volt accessories from EMF, so we'll have a lot of our converter and a lot of wires inside of this, so I like to utilize this space as well on the MX. Now on the SX over here, we can see the flat gas tank closer to the frame, leaving us less space to cut in buttons and switches and do fun stuff like that. Some of these things are personal preference depending on the bike you're going for, but it's good to know what you're actually after. Now another thing I want to talk about is actually the shock height, and on the MX style, if you upgrade to the 200 millimeter, it's going to give you a 2-inch lift, making this bike look a little taller and fit a little better for most. On the SX, it comes stock with the 200 millimeter, so it's kind of hard to find the bike size shock to get this to lift up a little bit more like we want to. Along with this 50cc tall seat mounting up onto the MX models, where the SX models, I have seen it done, but I think it's a little more work to get it where you want. Now another thing when looking at the SX, the forks are actually shorter from this point to this point down here. And on the MX we have a bigger gap here. So these forks are a little different, where the RSF doesn't even have any suspension, it's just hard single tube. So this brings a good opportunity for me to bring up one of our sponsors, Ride or Die Forks, which I don't have on me right now, but they are a great fork option. Go check those guys out, and they actually gave us a 10% discount, very generous of them. So thank you, Ride or Die Forks. Getting back to it. Now I will say a perk to the SX is if you do not have a Sawzall grinder to cut some metal parts off, the battery compartments is more open inside, and you'll have better chance fitting in batteries without cutting out the upper bracket like on the MX models. Alright, now that we went through a little bit of that, now maybe you know what model you're looking for. Let's take a look at some things to check out. All the time I have kids asking, can I get the battery plastics? Where do I get them? And I have kids asking, where do I get another gas tank? I put holes where I didn't want it, or my bike didn't come with one. I tell everyone those items are number one on my checklist. I want to see those on the bike uncut and unharmed because I want to cut in where I want my switches. So one for me is I want to make sure I see a good gas tank plastics and good both battery cover plastics. No matter what, these are kind of hard to find. Another thing we're going to look at is our rims and our spokes. Now we're going to make sure there's no crazy dents like this that's not going to hold our tire correctly. We're going to make sure there's no dented or spokes that aren't straight. And of course we want to make sure they're all tight. Good way I've always been taught to do this is hearing this sound. You want to kind of hear that they're taut and tight. A lot of times you can find one that's not good by dragging a screwdriver around it. But we want to make sure that there's none missing and that there's none incredibly loose. Now another good thing I like to do is actually get this wheel off the ground and give it a spin and see if that spin's aligned. Now there might be a little wobble in there sometimes and you're gonna see that, but if there's a lot of wobble when you look down that wheel, it's probably not doing so hot. That of course goes for front and back. Next, if you're gonna keep your front suspension for a little bit, you might want to check out how that thing sounds. For instance, that one's probably not very good. And that one sounds a lot better. Now another thing I have rarely seen is a crack in the frame, generally going to be in this front area. So we want to make sure this area is looking clean with no cracks on either side. And another place we've seen cracks is in this area, where on the SX they have actually added this little support. And on the MX we actually don't have it, and there is a stress point there where we have seen cracks. Now if you plan on running the 36 volt stock parts that's in there, of course turn it on, see how it runs, see if it takes a charge, and depending on that, you can ride it for a little bit. I know a lot of friends are having a great time with it, but eventually you'll probably get rid of those stock parts, so it's not something to be too concerned about. Some other weird things we see missing is the peg bolts a lot, where these aren't working correctly with the spring in it to where they lock in and kick out, which isn't a huge deal to me ever. We always want to make sure our swing arm bolts look like they're held in there good, holding our swing arm on and is not stripped out in any way or anything like that. And it doesn't help to make sure that your chain tensioner bolt hasn't been messed up, stripped, or bent if you're planning on running a chain tensioner, because it's kind of a pain to not have a chain tensioner. So we want to check out and make sure that our sprockets all look good and that they're not too rounded over and that they have some thickness to it, kind of like this, with our chain tensioner having that tension. We also want to make sure that our freewheel works, which means it's going to spin smooth backwards and lock in to go forward. Of course, we have a video showing how I upgrade freewheels, which does take a little modification. A quick little tip is keep your chains lubed up and always make sure that your chain is being replaced if it's starting to loosen or it's going to start rounding those over. Make sure that all our motor tabs are all intact and looking good. Now, one more thing you want to check out is your bearings in your wheels. Now, this one actually, the bearings were completely blown out, and you can see this wheel wobbles side to side. Now, a good way to test is we see that bearing is in there, and we can actually flex this back and forth, and there's not really any movement within down here, teetering back and forth. Again, front and back, along with making sure that our spacers are there and look correct, and there's nothing funny going on with the wheels movement. Now, another upgrade depending item is, are you going to upgrade your brakes? Most likely down the road, yeah. Are you right away? Maybe, maybe not. So, of course, check your brakes out, see if they're working, if they look like they've been kept up and tightened, or if it just looks like no one knew how they worked and they're just loose and need to be kind of tightened up. So, do check them out. They can work pretty good. We still have them on some random bikes here and there for the front because they work. For the rear, for wheelies, typically we're upgrading to hydraulic, obviously, so one thing to think about. Guys, if you have anything that I forgot or that you should add through the Razor times of learning, please add it in the comments down below. If you guys haven't checked out the Bomb Moto, check that out. We have a lot in the playlist on it. This is the Razor's big brother, comes as a rolling chassis and is ready to basically start putting your parts in that we can help you with as well. So guys, we do have some discount codes. Check out the link tree or on the website. Like Guts Racing with their seat covers, we have 20% discount code, along with Ride or Die forks like we talked about. Vivor we also have for their sets, but they are discontinuing those slowly, so we're seeing them out of stock more and more, unfortunately. Probably some others I'm forgetting. Of course, if you made a good choice, do go through it, make sure all your bolts, nuts, and everything is all tight, good to go, and have a great time out there and be safe. Let me know if you guys want to see a video if I should go through, if you're finding bikes that are already modded, what my opinion is on that and what you should look for in that. Alright, so looking at a full list. First, we're going to want to check out our plastics. We're going to want to check out our rims and spokes. We're going to want to check out our frame and our swing arm. We're going to want to check out our pegs and all of our bolts and everything like that. We're going to check out our chain tensioner. We're going to check out our freewheel if it's spinning, our sprockets, along with our bearings in the wheels. And last, we're going to check out our powertrain depending on if we're going to ride it. Sometimes you'll get a better deal on missing batteries, it doesn't work, and whatnot, which is gold for us. So depending on what your goals are for this RZR right off the bat, think about that. And just the obvious, are the tires pumped up or flat? Are they holding air? Does the bike look decent or beat up? You know, do check it out. Alright guys, hopefully that helps, and check out our video on maintenance and things you should go through every few months to make sure your bike's looking safe. So check that one out if we have it up, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for hanging out. Peace.